Hello, everybody. Belated Veterans Day, aka in Canada, Remembrance Day. Jody Ayler and myself here again. Byron Brown. How you doing, Jody?
I'm great, man. How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you. Veterans Day yesterday. We got to give a shout out to all of the troops, past and present, who have served our country. Up in Canada, where I am from, it's called Remembrance Day, and we wear poppies. Not sure if people remember, but a year ago today, a Canadian legend was unceremoniously retired from his position, and that is Mr. Don Cherry. Mr.
Yep.
Don Cherry, Grapes, Rock'em Sock'em Hockey. I mean, I grew up with that guy. He's an icon, and he made some comments that maybe were a little on point, but a little off color. His concern was much of what Arnold Schwarzenegger just voiced. And if you're not familiar with that, Schwarzenegger shot a video at a veteran cemetery, and he was disgusted with the fact that there was not a single person at the cemetery to obviously thank these troops that sacrificed their lives for the freedoms that we enjoy every day. Don Cherry made a similar sort of comment. In Canada, it's about poppies. You wear poppies the month of November to show support and remembrance of the troops that sacrificed their lives for the freedoms that we now enjoy. So anyways, I love Don Cherry. I think I hated to see that happen. I think a lot of Canadians did, but he was an older guy that really didn't bring his language up to speed, I would say. I think that's a fair statement. We also have someone who served here today, Forrest, who works with me. We obviously thank him for his service. What tours did you have, Forrest?
Afghanistan, Iraq, and then Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain.
Jesus, fuck, man. Afghanistan, Iraq. I couldn't even remember everywhere you've been. But thanks for your service, man. I know, hey, listen, at least the troops, I'm going to get your opinion on this. So I've always been curious because I like to thank troops for their service, but I've talked to some troops who necessarily aren't excited with how some people thank them for their service. What I've been told is they like the thanks, they like the appreciation, but hit it and quit it. No need to sit there and grovel in front of you and thank you, even though we could, because obviously we enjoy a lot of that stuff. And it's really nice, I think, that anybody wants to say anything, but I always want to thank someone in the way that they want to be thanked. And would you agree that a nice thank you for your service and on with your day is, or what would you like to see?
Yeah, because I don't know, it's like somebody always be like, thank you for your service. And then to me, everybody's like typical response for anything else. Oh, no, what? Oh, yeah, no problem.
I
that's
got
like
you.
the end of it, like cool.
Yeah.
It's better than the other part where people are against you or they try and belittle your service. That's
So
where
do
people really have an issue.
you really have people come up to you on Veterans Day and try to shit on you?
There's some people out there that absolutely.
That's unbelievable, man. Hey, anyways, that's unfortunate, man. But anyways, happy Veterans Day to all the veterans out there, and happy Remembrance Day to all the veterans up in Canada.
Byron, real quick,
yes,
I always find this question interesting. Did you ever consider the armed services when you were a kid?
You know what's funny is I was just talking to Forrest about this before we started today. So I started training for that Navy SEAL deal earlier this year, and I've lost a lot of weight. And part of that process is it's caused me to look into, how the military operates and different things. And then Forrest and I have been hanging out, and I've been asking him a lot of questions. And I just said to him this morning, I go, on the heels of watching Full Metal Jacket last night on Netflix, if you guys haven't, I can't believe I haven't watched it. Beauty of a movie. I'm just at the part where Cowboy was killed, Joker's brother, if you've seen it. But yeah, I really think I've actually thought, before I even thought about the military, I think I would have been great in SWAT, like in police. And I think honestly, a lot of my current mindset, so not my mindset when I was 18, 19, but currently, if I had the maturity and the wherewithal that I have now at the age of 42, I wish I had maybe at least some of that. In Canada, though, it's nothing that's talked about. Like down here, you come across quite a few people that have served or have family members that served. In Canada, it is super rare that you run across someone. The only person I remember ever is I coached hockey when I was in undergrad, and there was one man I coached that he was joining the military. Now, in my 20-some years living in Canada, that was the only person that I had met
Wow.
that was joining the military. Now, my great-great-grandfather, he fought for Canada in both world wars. But since then, I don't have anybody in my family that's served. It's a very uncommon thing in Canada. I don't even know where our military ranks compared to the United States, but needless to say, it's a fraction of it. And, you know, the government funding that America puts on it compared to Canada, you know, Canada is known as a peaceful nation. And let me tell you, like, I think our fighter jets are like 400 years old. and, you know, like if we have a battleship, it's probably the size of your guys' dinghy or something like that. And that's why, you know, it was funny. I remember up in Flagstaff, my wife's uncle, there's a vet who lives across the street. Maybe this is a hot button issue. I don't think so. I'm going to bring it up anyways. And so Doug Allen, man, I shouldn't have said his name. But anyways, my wife's uncle, and he's a proud Canadian. He was born and raised in Canada. He got drafted by the St. Louis Blues as a goalie, moved down here, played some minor hockey, and ended up meeting his wife, and they settled in Flagstaff, and he was a school teacher there forever. He's now retired. Very well-respected man, inducted into the Arizona Sports Hall of Fame, actually. And he had a Canadian flag outside of his house. And when the war started, a vet across the street came over and grabbed his flag, his Canadian flag, and threw it on the ground, and then knocked on his door and said, hey, I just took your flag and put it on the ground because fuck Canada, because they didn't join us in any of the wars. And listen, I get your opinion. I'm not shitting on anybody when I say this, but listen, Canada doesn't fight wars. It'd be like saying, you know, like the United States is known for making watches in relation to the Swiss. No, the Swiss are known for that. And America is known for being a country that has a very strong military, and they are known for their guns more than anything. So listen, like I get it. You guys want your support, but we're just a peaceful nation, and it's, you know, we do have an army, and I know that the government up there would happily institute it if needed, but most of the time we're gonna stay back.
We got your back, Canada. Like America's,
Yeah.
we got you. My brother-in-law is out of the military now. He was a Green Beret. He was an Army Ranger in the Special Forces for a decade, and like the kind of culture that exists, like, and that the challenges they've got to prove themselves in before they go do it for real, it's mind blowing. So yeah, I think it culturally, you know, I just think it's a different animal here, you know, just completely.
Yeah, well, and some people serve forever. You know, Forrest, how many years did you serve? 15 years, and then you had a back issue, right? You got medically discharged because of the back issue, medically retired. You know, and I think if it wasn't for that, you'd still be serving. Yeah, like you loved it. So that's great. You know, he got out because of a medical discharge, but there's athletes like Anderson Silva that I just don't know if they know when to hang him up. 46-year-old Anderson Silva just fought Uriah Hall, 36 years old. I don't know how many of you tuned into the fight, but Uriah Hall put a beating on Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva, a legend within MMA, a stellar career. Everybody, if you follow MMA, knows of Anderson Silva. And we've seen this with other athletes, right? We've seen Michael Jordan come back and play. We saw Wayne Gretzky play late into the St. Louis Blues and get bounced around to different teams. Jody, when is it time for an athlete to hang him up?
I think it used to be a lot clearer before we had all these advancements in sports science that allows quarterbacks to play into their 40s now with pretty, you know, regularity. The combat sports, like if you go back to boxing, we used to have all the, you know, Muhammad Ali fought too long, you know, George Foreman, Larry Holmes. There were so many great fighters that some of them more than others diminished their legacy because they stuck around too long. I don't know that Ultimate Fighting's been around long enough to sort of have those warning signs, and I think that Silva's one of them, you know, and I don't know that there's really a way to do it other than they've got to somehow see it for themselves, because who's going to tell Tom Brady you're not good enough to play anymore, right? If he's still able to occasionally go out there and play well.
Well, and I was just going to, sorry to cut you off, but that was my point. It's like he can still throw a pigskin. I mean, I know the Saints demolished him on Monday night, right? It was a Monday night game?
Sunday, yeah.
Oh, Sunday night. But yeah, like, if, you know, I think if he has enough games like that, no one will sign him, you know? And I think that's what pushes a lot of these guys into retirement. The ones that just can't pull the trigger themselves into retirement is a team willing to sign him or not. Isn't that really what happened with Brett Favre? right?
Yeah.
Almost the Favre story is very similar to the current Brady story, right? Green Bay wanted to, and they announced Aaron Rodgers was a starter. I can't even remember what really transpired with the Brett Favre issue.
I mean, it was just years and years of him pretending to want to retire, and then eventually he just forced his way out to the Jets, and then from the Jets ended up going to the Vikings, and then by the time the Vikings run was up, everyone was like, he doesn't have it anymore, you know. And I think even, you know, Kurt Warner to this day still kind of flirts with the idea that he could come back, but I don't think that's a flame that ever gets extinguished in athletes. I don't know that you could ever tell someone that they're just not capable anymore after their entire life revolved around, I'm better than 99.9% of all human beings at this, and self-confidence is step one to doing that, you know?
Well, and that's the exact point is, I think when you're an athlete or anything really, and you're a competitor and you're passionate about something, I mean, I know, I have a friend and she was a firefighter and she had to exit early and she went through a little depression over it because she loves the camaraderie and everything involved in being a firefighter. And I think Forrest is nodding his head, and I'm sure that's what he missed. And it's funny, you hear that from a lot of athletes, right? When they retire, like the first thing, more than almost the game itself, they miss the camaraderie, they miss the boys. There's this video, you guys got to watch it. It's called The Boys on the Bus. And it was a documentary shot, I believe, in the mid 80s, probably 87, 88, about the Oilers dynasty. And they thought the Oilers that year were going to beat the Islanders in the final, and they didn't. But it's a great video. You watch all the boys together on the bus and at dinner, Messier, Coffey, Gretzky, like the dynasty that the Oilers were. But it's that camaraderie. The thing is, I guess, if you're like Brett Favre, you can take a big hit and get concussed. I'm not saying that football is not dangerous, but for someone like Anderson Silva and you're in a squared circle, look at BJ Penn. BJ Penn, they called him the prodigy. He came back out of retirement and got his ass beat like twice embarrassingly, then lost a street fight, and now his legacy is shit. What you remember of BJ Penn is a drunk guy who got knocked out by a fat guy outside a bar. That's how you remember BJ Penn. I just don't want to remember Anderson Silva that way, or any of these guys that or women that we've appreciated their talent for so long. I want to remember them as a talent. That's the selfish part of me as a fan. But if I was one of those competitors, yeah, I think it'd be really fucking hard to hang them up.
Especially, like, think about that. If you're a UFC fighter or a boxer, getting your ass kicked is really the only way to know that you're done. But who wants to go out that way? Like, your whole life has been about beating other people up and showing your dominance physically, and then you lose. And I'm sure there's a part of Anderson Silva today that's like, well, I got to go out there and win my next one, and then maybe I'll think about it. And then he keeps losing, and eventually, you know, you're in that, you know, street fight, bar fight, viral video or whatever that everybody's like, well, you have to be done now.
Yeah. See, and there's way too many examples like that as opposed to good stories, right? Like De La Hoya's last fight, he got destroyed by Pacquiao. Like it was and that's how you remember De La Hoya now, or at least I remember him, right? Tyson, a little bit of a different story, right? I think his Roy Jones fight, I think it'll be entertaining. But now there's talk, he's saying that he might stick around after the Roy Jones fight. I don't know what that means. Does it mean that it's going to be something other than an exhibition? Because the Roy Jones fight is an exhibition. It's not really a regular sanctioned bout. So it'll be interesting. I just don't like to see these guys get their heads beat. And, you know, you talk about a quality of life after. I know Dana White, owner, president of the UFC, came out and said he hopes he never sees Anderson Silva fight again. And I don't think he's being a jerk when he says that. I think there's kindness in his heart. He just doesn't want to see this man get injured.
But see, let's compare and contrast that for a second to the other retirement that just happened in UFC, where we talk about going out on top. You know, John Elway retired after he won his second Super Bowl. Khabib, and I always butcher his last name. You know how to pronounce it much better than I do. But Khabib retires, and immediately everyone's like, well, no, that can't be your last fight. We need to make more money off you, and you still have more left in the tank. So, like, how do you find the absolute sweet spot of Khabib and Anderson Silva without either leaving money on the table or, you know, getting your ass kicked?
Yeah, you know what? Hey, listen, Khabib Nurmagomedov. I couldn't even tell you how to say it, Jody. But yeah, I think, listen, I'm sure he's made a lot of money. I think his family even had money back in, I don't know if he's Kazakhstan or Russian. My apologies if I'm wrong on either of those nations, but I don't think maybe it costs as much for him to live or whatever it is, but I think it's a really good decision on his part. He hasn't taken a lot of punishment. I don't think anyone thinks his next fight he would take a lot of punishment, but he's going to be able to enjoy his life. He hasn't suffered any serious injuries. I think he broke in his last fight, he fought with a broken foot. But I think that's probably the best way to do it. But to your point, I think a lot of guys, they're leaving money on the table, and that's their part of the career. When you were Wayne Gretzky and the St. Louis Blues call you and offer you a bag of money to come there, and you're like, what else am I going to do? And plus, I want to be in the locker room with the boys, and I love the game. So if someone's willing to pay you to fight or golf or play hockey or football professionally, I think you're going to take it. We see it. Jay Cutler, right? What was it? $9 million. The Dolphins paid him for one season. That guy has a lot of personality, by the way, right? Do you follow him on Instagram?
No.
You should. You should. Now, before when he was still married, his wife, I think, handled it. But now he does it, and it's all hunting and stuff. And he's actually kind of an interesting dude. I remember him as, kind of looking dopey, sitting back there for the Bears.
Like
right?
a Mimbo.
Yeah. Like it was just, he's a different dude. But hey, so the Masters is a good story. We talk about retirement. We talk about one old guy. Tell us the story. You're the one who told me, so I'm going to let you tell it.
Yeah, so the Masters teed off this morning after a couple-hour rain delay. Obviously, it's played in April most years. But the first 6 to 8 holes at the top of the leaderboard was Larry Mize, who was wearing full-blown suspenders, like old man golf-style suspenders, 62 years old. Only major championship he ever won was 1987, the Masters, so you get sort of a lifetime invitation back when you're a former champion. And there was like an hour where he was atop the Masters leaderboard, and now he fell off pretty quickly, but it was a fun story while it lasted.
Yeah, and then have you watched any of it yet? Because I haven't. I honestly haven't.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. The big story for the Masters this year was Bryson DeChambeau, who is this, and listen, he's this guy that has turned himself 40 to 50 pounds of muscle. I was going to call him a meathead, and then I realized Brian would probably snap me in half if I called him a meathead. But he put 50 pounds of muscle on, and there were rumors amongst, like, other players on tour would kind of hint at steroid accusations and like, however he did that, kind of wink, wink, nod, nod. But the dude, Bryson DeChambeau, is killing the ball off the tee, like hitting 400-yard drives, something the PGA Tour has never seen. Tiger has never come close. Phil Mickelson's never come close. And what it has done is it's changed golf courses, right? Because if he's getting 50 extra yards on his drive, well, it takes that second shot from being an iron to a wedge. And so he's been a controversial figure. He's won. He was kind of a Masters favorite. He's kind of unapologetic about it. He's just sort of like, hey, it's not my fault you guys can't hit it as hard as I can. And he's kind of arrogant, and he's kind of a pot stirrer by golf standards. And he has started poorly. Like, for example, golf, I think golfers appreciate this. His first tee shot today was a 3-wood that he hit 327 yards, which for most people, if you drive 327, it's amazing. He hit a 3-wood, 327 off the tee, but then missed a 4-foot birdie putt. So there is some real, like, Happy Gilmore. We were talking before, and there's some real kind of Happy Gilmore, and he's kind of the story of the Masters this year, which I don't like him. I mean, I'm not.
Why don't you like him? Why don't you like him?
I don't know, man. There's certain parts. I want personality, and I like people who are unapologetic. So I think he's great for golf. I'm glad he's on the tour. But he's an easy villain. There's just some people whose personality is naturally inclined to either be a hero or a villain. And this dude is villain.
And you say villain, and then you said also pot stirrer. I'm not as familiar with him, so I apologize. I'm not picking on you when I say this. What has he done that leads you to label him like that?
So in golf, everything is about decorum. Everything is about being, very polite and there's not trash talk. We don't see guys calling each other out. there's very little that exists in every other sport that is trash talk and competitiveness that exists in golf. And so when anyone has any kind of personality that is beyond just your typical country club, rigid golf decorum, it stands out. And Bryson DeChambeau stands out because he's kind of willing to say, like, hey, the other golfers aren't as good as me. It's not my fault. Like, you wanna drive it as long as I do, add some weight. You know what I mean? Like, and not that explicitly, in very safe golf ways, but it still
That's
stands
almost
out.
worse.
Yeah, I mean, the golf culture is you don't call people out, and you're always kind of humble and modest, and well, the course just gave me some great looks today. And DeChambeau is more of a me first, like bringing that attention to himself.
I'm gonna test you. I think someone could say that exact same thing about Tiger Woods.
Yes.
Back in the day. So pre-scandal golf club to car thing, people thought he was on steroids.
Yep.
He is markedly smaller since he's come back. I know he had the back surgery and everything, but he was fucking jacked there for a while.
Yep.
And everyone was saying the same thing. But I didn't hear as many people calling for his head because he was Tiger Woods and they had him, hoisted up above everybody else. And he put butts in seats. He put butts in front of TVs and people were making a shit ton of money off of him. Do you think that that's a fair comparison?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great comparison. Listen, Tiger's name was brought up in one of those clinics in Florida that had been, he had a connection to one of those doctors that was implicated in PEDs for other athletes. So people talked about it. Now, at that point, you're right. He was the golden goose. Nobody was going to kill the golden goose. I mean, Tiger single-handedly elevated sponsorship, paid.
He changed the
earnings.
game. He changed the game.
Changed the game. But also an important distinction is that was pre-social media, right? Like Tiger Woods.
That's a good point.
You mentioned the Thanksgiving Day golf club to the car. That was really social media's first big sports moment in a lot of ways. And so his entire career from that point forward has been treated differently than it was before. And I think social media plays a role in that because people can go online and immediately be like, I don't like Bryson DeChambeau. He's an asshole. Fuck this guy. Whereas before, nobody would know how many people felt that way. We would just be forced to watch him. So I do think that plays a big role too.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's funny. I heard about what was the first tournament DeChambeau won?
Oh gosh,
because it was a while ago, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And then he's been busy. It's not like he's just becoming known this month. He's been known for a while, and these antics have continued for a while. Correct?
Yes. Each time he wins, the conversation turns it because there's some people that believe that he is the future of golf, not like him personally, but that his style, that what this is going to usher in is that more golfers look like me on tour than look like you. And there's a certain part, Tiger was also instrumental in that, like the physical fitness, think John Daly, John Daly, overweight guy, smoking a heater out there. Who gives a shit what his cardio regimen is in between tour events?
Yeah.
He would go out there and play golf. And
Right.
Tiger introduced physical fitness to golfers as professional athletes in ways that no other golfer really had. DeChambeau takes it to the next level. Now it's like, well, you need to be lifting weights as much as you're working on your short game. But here's the thing. I mentioned at the top, his short game's terrible. I mean, he's terrible with the wedges. He's terrible around the green. He's not a good putter. And so it's the old, golf adage, you drive for show, putt for dough. And until he starts mastering golf short game, listen, I'm not a good golfer. I for whatever reason, I'm capable. I've got a wiry frame. I've got long limbs. I can drive the ball 300 yards fairly, not consistently, but a couple times around. I can mash it off the tee. I'm terrible in the short game. And that's Bryson DeChambeau. And I don't think people respect his game. At the same time, he's being packaged as the next big thing. You know what I mean? Like that contrast with players. Well,
and it's funny that you bring that up. You bring up John Daly because that's probably the best analogy to DeChambeau when you start talking about is his behavior professional or not. I wasn't really tuning into golf when John Daly was playing, but I remember really good documentary, 30 on 30, that ESPN did on John Daly, and I forget the name of it. Can you look up the name of that documentary for us? It had a cool name, and it was John Daly's signature saying, something about driving. We'll pull it up. But that was a guy who was smoking heaters on the course. You're right.
Yep.
He wore very loud clothing. Hit it hard. That was hit it hard was John Daly's whole thing. Hit it hard. And
Living
but
in
you know
the
what?
trailer, like in between events, dating Hooters waitresses.
Yep. But look at this is the thing. Is it more important for golf to stay where it is historically as being a gentleman's game, or is there anything wrong with injecting it with a little bit of spice when we're in a current social setting where everything is changing? And for me, the one thing I always like it, and I think a lot of golf fans like it, is you think about the Waste Management Open that happens here every year. There's so many people that go to it. I avoid it like the plague because there's a lot of drunk college kids and I want to punch one in the fucking face for being a drunk bastard. But anyways, I watch that and I see a lot of people have fun. And I'm just curious from a businessman standpoint, if I'm running the PGA and this stuff is putting more people in the seats and viewership is increasing, maybe that's part of the reason why they're championing him as, the next big thing, because they see this as an avenue to market the PGA towards this new TikTok audience and the new Instagram audience. They're not as interested in people like Gary Player back in the day where we could respect him and how he played and how he conducted himself. Now we're living in a society of everything instant and everything loud and outlandish if you want attention. You just look at these YouTube kids and Instagram influencers that are making millions of dollars. They're making millions of dollars filming themselves doing dumb, crazy shit. I'm not saying DeChambeau's doing dumb, crazy shit. I'm just saying in comparison to every other golf player in the PGA Tour, he's probably considered fairly outrageous and outlandish in the context of professional golf.
In that context, yeah. But listen, the last people to know you've got to change are the people inside. So, we could all say, hey, golf culture should change. It's more interesting. We say this about baseball, too. Why doesn't baseball allow guys to celebrate home runs like NFL players score touchdowns? Because there's this unwritten rule in baseball, you don't show up other players. Well, entertainment-wise, I'd much rather have dudes pulling WWE-type stunts after hitting a home run than just put your head down, trot around the bases. Golf's that times 10, right? So DeChambeau could, you're right. I mean, his drives are viral videos, right? Attention is a currency, and him mashing the ball 400 yards off a tee is kind of amazing to watch.
Right.
But imagine if Bryson DeChambeau crushed a drive and then gave a flex on the tee box and turned to his playing partner, was like, "Your turn, big guy." That would be amazing for you and I. Golf would fucking hate it. The infrastructure of golf is they don't want change. They don't want cultural change. They don't want the sport of golf to look more like other professional sports. They kind of get off on the fact that it's different and it's a gentleman's game, and that Bryson DeChambeau, if you were to try to challenge that, would be met with incredible internal resistance.
Yeah, I see that, but I think, games are made better because of characters. The NBA was more exciting with Rodman in it. I mean, whether you hate him or love him, he was exciting to watch, and you would tune in to see what he did next. I can only imagine when I was thinking, instead of the flex, imagine DeChambeau up there crushes a 420-yard fucking drive and does a golf club flip. Right? Instead of a bat flip, right? He just fucking tosses it like this and just beelines it right to the thing.
Yeah.
Like some of those pitchers that run from the dugout, he just goes like this and then just sprints it right off. I think people would be like, fuck, I'm going to tune in to watch that motherfucker every day of the week, man.
Yeah, and listen, whoever decides to eventually do that is going to be incredibly wealthy because you're immediately going to become the most marketable dude in golf. The problem is, herd mentality and groupthink is a real powerful thing, and Bryson DeChambeau, whoever, is going to have to know that when they're in the clubhouse with other golfers, everyone's going to hate his guts. And we haven't seen someone sort of willingly do that. And I don't think DeChambeau's that kind of personality. He's just kind of a dick. He's just kind of arrogant.
Where's he from? If he's from Florida, holy fuck.
I'll look it up right now.
DeChambeau.
He is
So I'll look it up.
Yeah.
Florida. Excuse me, California. He's from Modesto, California.
Oh,
He's from
really?
California. Yeah. And
No, he's from
by the way,
Modesto,
he
California.
won the U.S. Open this year. That was his first
Yeah.
major championship. Was the U.S. Open. He also wears. I don't know how you feel about this. He wears a dumb shit hat. Like I can't stand the hat.
What's the hat?
He wears. It's like a newsy hat combined with a Kangol hat. Like
Brian,
he
can you
says
pull
it's
up
a
a picture of the
tribute
hat
to
and
Ben
put it in?
Hogan. Yeah, we got to. It looks dumb, and I feel like that's enough reason to root against him. But I'm petty, very petty.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, I want to see DeChambeau's hat. We'll throw DeChambeau's hat up here. I'm having trouble even saying his name. But from the PGA to the MLB, we got Astros. It's Lunau. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, yeah.
And he was the general manager of the Astros during their controversial World Series win. And he was unceremoniously fired recently for cause. And just to give everybody a little insight, if you have a contract with an employer, if they let you go for cause, they do not have to pay you anything owing on your contract. That's why a lot of people, when they get fired, and you see the NFL coaches as a perfect example, they get bought out from their contract, because if there's a contract for employment, then it's a contract, it's a binding contract, and they have to comply with it. So Lunau is saying he had zero knowledge of the Astros garbage can banging scandal. And so the Astros are saying he knew and he was maybe instrumental in it. So that's what they're relying upon for the for cause to say, we don't owe you any of the remaining $22 million. Do I got that right, Jody?
You do, and a little bit more context. Yeah, you got it right. Is that the MLB conducted this thorough investigation of the Astros sign stealing scandal. The players who were directly responsible for stealing the signs and relaying them to each other, no players got punished. They were basically told, in exchange for your compliance in this investigation, you name names, we will grant you immunity from punishment. And so the manager, A.J. Hinch, was suspended for a year and fired by the Astros. And then Jeff Lunau was fired, and not, like you said, $22 million on the table. Meanwhile, the players who orchestrated it, executed it, none of them got punished.
That's just crazy to me. I think Lunau he's now filed a lawsuit against the Astros to recover part, if not all, of the $22 million. And this is the thing from a legal standpoint. I always say, trying to prove what is in someone's head is almost impossible unless you have some email, letter, correspondence, document, or the like written by that person, or you have a witness that heard that person say something. I don't think the Astros are going to prove, unless maybe A.J. Hinch, cut some sort of deal and told them something, and they've withheld that. But I would assume Lunau knows, hopefully, as much as the Astros know, and or his lawyer tried to gather as much information, because they're going to have serious egg on their face if the Astros have some smoking gun that shows that Lunau has this knowledge. And the other thing that the Astros, I think, are more concerned about with the lawsuit is whenever you file a lawsuit, all of a sudden you have these rules of civil procedure that come into play that now allow lawyers like myself to subpoena documents and request documents. So the Astros, really run the risk of having this can of worms reopened for a national audience. And for those reasons, I believe that the Astros and Lunau are going to come to some sort of financial agreement and settle this quietly, and it'll go away.
Yeah, and real quick, what's crazy about this is, for people that aren't super familiar with the dynamics of leadership in baseball, a general manager is almost never in the clubhouse. GMs are in the owner's suite. They're not involved in game management. They're not involved in in-game decisions. So if you put yourself in his shoes, like you're the GM, you drafted, signed, and traded for this championship team. You are responsible for putting all these players together, but you're not responsible for what they do in the clubhouse. And then this clubhouse-born scandal where Astros players were relaying pitches to each other via trash can bangings. This investigation happens, and you're one of only two people that really pays any punishment, and you may not have had any direct involvement in it whatsoever, but you're also responsible overall for the team. When you're the GM, it's your responsibility. Like, I would be fucking outraged. Like, at that point, you would understand why he'd be filing every lawsuit he could, because $22 million is not a small amount of money for a guy that may never work in baseball again.
Yeah, and a great point that you just made about the GM. He probably was never in the clubhouse. For sure, it's hard to believe that he was ever around the players and or whoever else was involved in coming up with this sort of scandal. I mean, I've never been a part of a scandal like this, but I feel like it happened more innocently than premeditated. Like, I think it probably like two guys sitting on the bench one game and go, you know what? Like, we can see he's always throwing that fucking change up or whatever it is. I'm like, how about if we just banged on a garbage can and the batter would know? I honestly think that's how they start. And then it just progresses. No one thinks they're going to win the World Series and then open themselves up to an investigation. I bet it started innocently enough like that. And if it did start like that, upper management isn't going to fucking know about it. I think it's a little scary to say that. And to your point, the GM is the umbrella who looks over the whole organization. But does that mean anytime anybody does anything wrong, the GM can get fired for cause? So like if a player gets a DUI, is it the responsibility of the GM? If a player storms the mound and starts fighting the pitcher, should the GM also get it? I mean, that's what we call in the law a slippery slope, is when you start punishing someone for that behavior, you got to take it to its logical conclusion. And if you take it to its logical conclusion and it doesn't make any fucking sense, usually then you don't have a good legal case. And that's what I think is going to happen with the Astros.
And I think they're good points. I would say this about Houston. It was clear that there was a problem with the overall culture of the organization that bred that kind of systemic. It may have started innocently. It turned into electronic espionage and really beyond just, the innocence it may have began with. And I do think a GM can be held responsible because a team owner might just be like, we just got to clean house. We got to flush this bad culture out. There's rot in here. Let's just, even if you're not the one doing it, you're part of it, flush it out. But that's not what happened. It was just him and the manager while they kept all the players who are really good players. And that would drive me crazy. So I mean, it's going to be an interesting resolution.
Well, and one little insight too is when these things happen, they usually progress in this manner, which would be the Astros calling Luhnow and saying, we're going to let you go. Luhnow saying, pay my $22 million. Astros like, fuck you. He goes, okay, I'm going to sue you unless you pay my $22 million. Astros go, fuck you. We have you dead to rights. So he files a lawsuit. That's typically how it goes. Obviously, much more prolonged than that. I'm making light of it in a very short context, but that's typically how it works. And maybe Luhnow's lawyer was involved in it or not. I don't know. But that's why, again, I think what's end up happening is they're going to have to pay him some money. I just think to avoid the bad publicity of this, they're still getting dragged through the mud. I don't hear opposing players as often as I did with quotes of, hey, essentially, fuck the Astros. So they're kind of on the outs now. You don't want to relive it. And I'm sure Luhnow knows that, and I'm sure his lawyer made a strategic move. But from one naughty GM to another, we got Tony La Russa, who got pinched for his second DUI right here in our backyard. What do you know about that, Jody?
So earlier this year, Tony La Russa apparently was popped for a DUI. He was recently hired as the manager of the Chicago White Sox. 76 years old, won multiple World Series, hasn't managed in close to a decade. And as you mentioned, his second DUI. The organization, the White Sox, are owned by Jerry Reinsdorf, who is best friends with Tony La Russa. La Russa started his career in Chicago for Jerry Reinsdorf. They've remained very tight, so they're very good friends. They hired La Russa despite knowing that he did have a DUI this year, and there have been some calls from, and I happen to agree with it. I think you and I had this conversation a little bit earlier. Like, I think not everyone who gets a DUI, it's not like you talked about slippery slope. Like, I don't believe in a world where if you make a mistake, you should lose your job. Like, you send off one tweet. Obviously, not all tweets or offenses are created equal. Nuance matters. But if you get a DUI, serious offense, could have killed somebody, terrible. Nobody condones the behavior, but I don't think it should generally mean anyone who gets a DUI should lose their job right off the bat.
Turn off the light.
But on the other hand,
third switch, you had it on, and then you turned it off. Sorry,
But on
Jody.
the other hand, I feel like if you're 76 and you've already had a DUI, there was this movement like Byron. Here's where it drives me crazy. How many dudes have worked their ass off and grinded away to become a baseball manager that aren't getting a chance because Tony La Russa's best buds with the owner and he got a DUI and it doesn't matter? Like, that would piss me off. I think there's some injustice there that doesn't need to be there. Like, I'm not saying banish Tony La Russa from baseball and he can never work again. Hire him as a consultant, but leading your team after such a, flagrant judgment mistake to me is wrong.
Hey, Forrest, it's the third light switch. You had it on and then you turned it off. No, last one. Go last one, sorry. Last light switch. Yep. Leave it. It should be on. I think you hit the remote and turned it off. It's on now. Use the remote. It'll go on. Sorry, we're heating up over here. We got to turn the fan on, Jody. But yeah, you know what? It's funny with people like Tony La Russa. I definitely think that they get some special treatment. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame GM. I think if he wasn't a Hall of Fame GM, he probably would have never been hired with a new DUI on top of an old DUI. I mean, he crashed his car into a curb, left it. Not good publicity at all. Obviously, I think if you're an employer, that would worry you. And I'm sure that they're going to have a firm talk to Tony La Russa. But that's the other thing. I mean, how old is Tony La Russa?
76.
76. So I'm assuming there's not a lot of qualified GMs out there if you're willing to bring in, again, I know it's a Hall of Famer, but with something like this, you see a lot of organizations now going for younger talent. The White Sox could have brought back Ozzie Guillen, and I heard them say no to that idea right away. But you know what? I'm a firm believer in second chances. His other DUI was I think over a decade ago. I think if they hopefully enroll him in some classes that maybe he needs some further education on, maybe he needs some help. Maybe he's got a drinking problem. And if he does have a big drinking problem and the White Sox know about it, labor laws require them to help give him some counseling and so forth. And so that could be going on in the background. That's the one thing when you hear about these legal stories. On the outside, we think maybe there's no punishment, there's no consideration to the negative or anything. But I think when you get inside of these situations, there's much more going on than we think on the outside.
What's crazy is the White Sox were a playoff team last year.
Right.
And this season. And they fired their manager to hire Tony La Russa, who's best friends with the owner. Most people believe La Russa is going to be a massive failure anyway because baseball is an analytics-driven sport now, and Tony La Russa is as old school as it gets. Listen, I'm a big proponent of we undervalue the elderly in our culture in America. I think we probably elevate too many 19-year-olds on social media and not enough of World War II vet coverage. Like, that's just my personal philosophy. But 76 is kind of fucking old to be running a Major League Baseball team. And I think part of this, Byron, is I think in people's brain, when they hear a 76-year-old got a DUI, they're like, oh, he probably just had an extra glass of wine at dinner and drove home. And if it was a 26-year-old, we're talking about well, that guy was fucking out of control. Like, where was he at a club? Where was he? But it doesn't make it any less egregious that this dude, Tony La Russa, who should fucking know better by all accounts, still either, if you listen to or read the arrest report, Tony La Russa drops to the arresting officer I'm a Hall of Fame baseball manager, Tony La Russa.
Oh, I hate when they
So
do that,
he starts playing that card, and I'm like, there's a part of me that's just like, fuck this guy. Like, he shouldn't get this up. There's someone more deserving that doesn't have the baggage of DUIs, who's not best friends with the owner, who deserves. How many conversations did we have this summer in terms of the social justice conversation of, you know what, there are people that have earned an opportunity that don't get it because there are systems in place that prioritize this kind of bullshit over just who's the most deserving. And I feel like, and I'm not, contending for the woke award here, but I feel like this is an example of a 76-year-old guy who had a second DUI and pulled the "Don't you know who I am" card probably shouldn't have the privilege of managing one of 30 Major League Baseball teams.
Yeah, you know what, Jody? That's a really good point, man, that I didn't think about. You're right. Like, keep giving people like this second chances because, it is another second chance. He had a DUI over a decade ago. And you're right. I agree about the comments that you've made about the elderly however we want to define that. But I do believe that there's a lack of concentration on the younger generations. And, you know, we've seen in football, remember, I think Tomlin was one of the youngest, if not the youngest coach when Pittsburgh hired him back in the day. And now he's never had a losing season. And I think more teams should do that, because to your point, there's a lot of young men and women that are working grunt jobs in different professional sports that are highly talented and skilled and that could do the job. I mean, wasn't it McVie, from now the coach of the St. Louis Rams, LA Rams, my apologies. And he started off as a grunt. I think he was like Belichick's or someone's like lunch boy, you know? And now you hear interviews in McVay, and he's reciting every player on the defense for opposing players and their strengths and weaknesses and plays they ran. I mean, the guy's a friggin' genius. And there's probably someone similar to him within baseball that the White Sox should take a look at. And you're right. You know, when you think about the Rooney Rule and all these other things, these old boy systems of owners hiring their friends probably should go. And people who are up and comers, or maybe they're in their 30s and 40s, should get the opportunities more so. And I agree with you also about the comment of the 19 and 20-year-olds. I mean, our shift in values is, to me, fucking crazy, that we're holding up people, you and I aren't, but other people are, on pedestals that quite honestly have zero fucking talent and zero substance to provide society. And we're brushing away people who have a rich history that we can learn from. And those are the older people. I agree with it wholeheartedly. It was my grandpa's birthday recently, and he was one of the smartest person I know. He was the most patient person with a young Byron Brown that you can imagine. And I learned a lot from him. And my cousin posted about him, and you know, it made me emotional, because I wish I had someone like that still in my life to provide me with guidance, and I don't. And I think a lot of people would be better off if they had someone. You know, it's the old adage. It's, you know, the stupid make their own mistakes and the smart learn from those mistakes. And, you know, that's what you have when you have someone older who's teaching you and making your life easier. And that seems to have gone by the wayside to these social influencers whose behavior, maybe they're great people off camera and maybe they're just normal, you know, people at home, but their behavior, at least the stuff I see when my girls are watching and stuff, it's nothing that I want to be a part of.
Yeah, what's crazy about it is like I think what everybody would agree on, no matter where you fall on any of the topics we're talking about, is like, if you do things the right way and work hard and put in the time and put in the effort, you should be rewarded with opportunities. Yep. But that's not what is happening here. It's the continuation of, oh, who are you friends with? Oh, okay, well, we'll just overlook all the other bad shit you did. And so I think that's a terrible, I mean, the White Sox fired a manager who got into the playoffs to hire La Russa, who, by the way, there's a part of the story that we haven't touched on, which is La Russa, and because I don't know the full context, but La Russa has previously made comments in years before that some black baseball players have considered offensive. Now, La Russa's best friend is also Dave Stewart, who is the general. La Russa used to be the chief baseball officer for the Diamondbacks, and his general manager, Dave Stewart. He's got a long history of succeeding, but there were some comments made by La Russa that current members of the White Sox team didn't appreciate hiring La Russa based on those prior comments. So you had all this shit up, and it's like, what are you doing with hiring this guy? You know, it just doesn't make sense.
Well, and I didn't even know that backstory, but that's a backstory that if people continue to push, we've seen results where the White Sox may fire him. If enough pressure is put on the White Sox from players and fans alike, we could see the White Sox fire him.
There was one of the top free agents in Major League Baseball this year, Marcus Stroman, who is a black pitcher, formerly of the Blue Jays, now was of the New York Mets, said he was previously considering signing with the White Sox, but he would no longer consider signing with the White Sox because they hired Tony La Russa in his previous comments. Wow. So if that continues, obviously the White Sox may be compelled to make a decision based other than public pressure. Yeah. Well, from a positive DUI to a positive COVID test, we got the Cal football team in some trouble, right? One positive COVID test
has resulted. I think it's the Berkeley City Council or Berkeley County or whatever. They've indicated that since there was a bunch of players around this one player that tested positive for COVID, they had to quarantine everybody, which has resulted in if Cal had to field the current team, they would have to field almost a brand new team, from my understanding. And so they face this dilemma. They play Arizona State. It's in Arizona, correct, Jody, the game?
Yes.
Okay. But despite the fact that it's being played in Arizona, Cal does not know whether they're going to get approval from their local regulatory bodies to field the whole team or if some of the team will have to be in quarantine. Do I got that right?
Yep. The entire offensive line. So the entire offensive line for the Cal Golden Bears is basically in quarantine for 14 days from their first exposure, which is now, 8 or 9 days ago.
So what do you think is going to happen here? Are we going to see Cal travel, the entire regular team with the offensive line travel to Arizona to play?
I have a hard time seeing it. Listen, there are already 8 FBS football games that are postponed this week due to COVID. The Pac-12 had 2 games last week, including Cal and Washington. So listen, part of this is the local politics, right? Which is, if this were Alabama and it was Nick Saban, they're playing football because Alabama football, the Crimson Tide run that state. Berkeley there have been rumors for years that Berkeley was just going to get rid of all of their sports. Like Cal is a prestigious, academic school that doesn't give a shit about the athletic department the way that other universities do. So I don't think Justin Wilcox, the head coach, who's been very vocally outspoken about how unfair this is, and really when you dive into it, it does seem extreme. I mean, all of these players have tested positive since they entered quarantine. It's been over a week. None of them have any symptoms. Like, this seems very heavy-handed, but it's the local municipality's decision, and they're trying to prevent community spread and community outbreak. But Cal doesn't care about football in the same way that USC or UW or Ohio State does. So I think what we're probably going to see is Cal's just going to have to eat this crap sandwich, and just face facts that they're representing a school that in many ways rightfully doesn't glamorize sports the way other campuses do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a shame. I mean, you would think if that's the attitude they're going to take, that they shouldn't hold some of these players hostage, because obviously the players want to get on the field because they want to increase their ability to get drafted in the NHL and show off their skill set. It just seems like a lot of this stuff going on around COVID and everything right now, it's so rigid, everyone's analysis. I feel like, to what you just said, that none of these players are exhibiting symptoms. I just feel like there's a better approach. It seems really draconian to me to try to prevent an entire football team or part of that football team from competing. If you're concerned and you're not that favored for the football program, then get rid of them, and don't do this. Because listen, if you're going to let these guys come to school and play, then they should play. And maybe you guys should have set up better regulations or stuff, maybe safety precautions before. I don't know what they've done. I'm sure they thought it out. I'm not saying that they didn't. But, we've seen the New Mexico team relocate essentially to Las Vegas, Nevada, so that they could continue on with their season. And I think if Cal doesn't get the thumbs up to do this in Monday, if I was the coach, it wouldn't be the concern of one game. My concern would be multiple games. And so if that's my concern, and they're not going to let us or potentially cause us to field a team that we don't think could be the right team to win a game against ASU, I would, if I was Cal, I'd relocate to Arizona or Nevada and do what some of these other teams have done.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think you're right about the long-term picture of the season, because what they could do reasonably this week is just travel to ASU. You're out of state, you're in Tempe, and stay there until Monday, when the quarantine is supposed to be over for these players anyways, and then they could all return back. But here's the problem. Like, what happens if this happens again? Right. Now you could lose your entire season. And listen, Justin Wilcox, his contract has, performance bonuses. He's ultimately evaluated on winning and losing football games. So there's some competing priorities here. But I agree with you. I mean, I feel like if they're going to be this heavy-handed in a belief that it is keeping the larger community safe by not making special exceptions. Listen, Canada is prevented the Blue Jays from playing in Toronto, and by all accounts, they're going to prevent the Toronto Raptors from playing this season in Toronto. So now the Raptors are going to play in Tampa Bay temporarily. So
you want
that's unique to America. Because we prioritize sports above just about everything, but Canada has already kicked out a team and is on the verge of kicking out a second team.
So everybody, right, was like, hey, if Biden gets elected, there's people saying they're going to move to Canada. I'm going to tell you about Canada here for a second. Health Alberta, so the province of Alberta, where I'm from, instituted a law that during Thanksgiving, you could, and Thanksgiving in Canada has already happened, but you could only have 4 people in your house. For holiday gatherings, you can only have 4 people in your house. And my buddy was telling me this, and I was like, what are they going to knock on your door and count? He goes, oh, no, they're encouraging and they're offering, I think they're offering incentives if you rat out your neighbors. So imagine that happening in America. That means that there's no warrant to enter your house. The police can knock on your door and enter your house and count how many people are in your house. That's Canada for you, you know? But anyways, I get sidetracked. But if college football keeps missing games, it's going to affect how the playoffs now work. Now, the NFL has already, the owners of the NFL, I should say, have maybe agreed. Maybe it's a tentative agreement. But anyways, they've had an agreement on how a 16-team structured playoff format would work. Do I have that right?
You do, yeah. Currently, the playoff format is that 7 teams from each conference would make the playoffs. That's new this year. They expanded it by 1. It had been 12 in the past. It's 14 this year. The NFL just formalized and approved an emergency plan to expand the playoffs this year to 16 teams, 8 teams in the AFC and NFC, if the NFL is unable to conclude their 17-week season on time. So what that means is now that we're at week 10 of the NFL season, it's a lot harder to reschedule games because teams have already experienced their bye week. So all the flexibility of the NFL schedule is basically gone. We're also seeing teams deal with more COVID positive tests right now than any other time during this pandemic. So the NFL was like, well, shit, if we get to a point where one team can't play a game, we know it's no longer really possible for us to reschedule that game without changing everyone's schedule. The domino effect would be massive. So if that happens, will it simply expand the playoffs to make sure we try to capture any deserving team that may have been cost or unfairly given an opportunity? Here's what I think, Byron, and I think this is a really interesting conversation for football fans. I don't think anything about the COVID environment right now in sports with the proliferation of tests and the expectation that more tests, positive tests are coming because it's wintertime in most of the country. I don't think adding more teams makes sense. The only thing that matters right now for the NFL is, can we get to the postseason? And if we get to the postseason, can we have the postseason done without interruption? Because the last thing the NFL wants is an NFL playoff game postponed because of COVID. Right. So to me, we've talked about bubbles before. I think the NFL should have said the opposite, been like, we're going from 14 teams in the playoffs to 10 teams, and we're doing a bubble because we can't do a bubble. 16 teams, each team's got 52-man roster, plus 20 coaches. You're still talking about thousands and thousands of people in a bubble that logistically isn't possible.
Right. Yeah. No. That's a good point. I mean, what do you think, though, if let's assume that the NFL has a truncated season and the playoff format is different than normal? That would be maybe somewhat similar to what happened with Major League Baseball, because obviously when the World Series was won, it was under a different format. And then also when the Stanley Cup was won, when Tampa Bay won the Stanley Cup, it was obviously a truncated format too. Now, when Tampa Bay won, and I forget the name of the professional hockey player that said this, it was a current NHL player, but he criticized the Tampa Bay Lightning's win by saying, like, listen, it wasn't the same because in NHL playoffs, everyone was in one of 2 cities and they didn't have to travel. So obviously the travel makes it harder, especially if you're going coast to coast in different time zones and you're away from your family and your different things. So he was saying that the Stanley Cup that the Tampa Bay Lightning won was not as prestigious as winning a regular Stanley Cup. I think that's complete bullshit. What do you think?
No, I agree. I think it's ridiculous. I mean, the challenge is, yeah, I mean, there may be some benefits that you're not traveling, but the challenge is of being cooped up away from your family or cooped up in, at that point, what was it, Edmonton or Toronto is
Correct.
Totally unique. The NFL to this point has basically shown an inclination to just play through these COVID tests, which is probably what they'll continue to do. There was a report since the last time we were on. There is one NFL player, he's a rookie running back, who will not be able to play the rest of the year because he's been hospitalized twice for COVID complications. And so his season is done. There's a second player for the Las Vegas Raiders, Trent Brown, who had previously tested positive for COVID. He's the player that got an IV improperly from a team physician 2 weeks ago and ended up in the hospital because an air bubble got into his. He is now back on the COVID list with COVID complications. So the NFL is going to have to reckon with this differently if there continue to be more players suffering long-term complications from COVID. To this point, overwhelmingly, the vast majority of players that have gotten it have recovered, within a week and are back on the field.
Right, but to your point, if you do less teams, what do you say then about the argument it's not fair? It's not fair. But the way I look at it is look at the Miami Dolphins. Do they deserve to be one of the 16 teams in that, COVID playoff scenario? I would say no. So I think your idea is much better, is shrink it down. If you're not a 500 club, there goes the whole, what is it, the NFC East with the Cowboys?
Right.
It's just fucking horrible. Like that whole division should be out, which I know doesn't make sense, but I'm just saying, look at everybody's playing under the same conditions. That's why I think the comment is bullshit about saying the Stanley Cup, is somewhat less prestigious this year because Tampa Bay won it under different circumstances. They won it under different circumstances. You could make the argument they won it under harder circumstances because they didn't spend any time with their family. They didn't do anything. They were in a bubble for a prolonged period of time. The NBA did it, and the NBA players hated it. And they were in it for a shorter period, I believe, from the NHL. So, yeah, it's interesting, but I think probably the way the NFL did it is they're just trying to be as fair and equitable as possible in a day and age where equality and fairness is being championed more than anything else. But I think it would be to the detriment of the league as well if that was to occur, because, I'm not going to watch whoever's playing the Dolphins. If they go to the 16, I'm going to watch a different game, and that's just going to affect him.
Yeah, listen, the idea that it might not be fair if a few teams got excluded, tough shit. Like, people can't see their parents, for 9 months. Like, it's a pandemic. I'm sorry. It's not like anyone created this or wants it, but if you're going to try to get a Super Bowl champion and you want a season completed, you might have to make some concessions like that. Again, hopefully we don't have to worry about this. Hopefully the season gets finished on time as scheduled and it's 14 teams and it's business as usual, but I'm not sure how adding teams makes it easier to contain.
Right. No, I agree. Well, hey, that's it for today. We appreciate everybody tuning in as always. We drop the video Saturday. If you have any video or any legal issue that you want Jody and I to analyze, please shoot us a DM. Sports Talk Law is the Instagram, but Google anywhere Sports Talk Law Talk and you will find us. We appreciate it. Please go to the link and subscribe. And until next episode, from Jody and myself, we appreciate every single one of you, especially the troops. Thank you very much.